Welcome to everybody here today, and welcome to our next Lunch in the Garden program here at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Rensselaer County. We're certainly glad to have a lot of folks joining us today on this beautiful day in May. We're glad you came inside for a few minutes to maybe have your lunch, which is the idea behind all this, I guess, and get a little information and update on gardening. So today our topic is going to be inviting pollinators to your garden. If you'd like to see this program again, you can go to our Cornell Cooperative Extension channel on YouTube. So how you do that is you go to YouTube and then you type in Cornell Cooperative Extension of Rensselaer County into the search box, and all of our webinars will come up, and you'll have hours and hours of viewing pleasure. So we have a lot of great webinars that are stored on the YouTube channel. And this one will appear in the next few days. So we're going to aim for that. Today, we welcome you here. And if you have any questions for Kathy, our speaker, you can type them in the chat box. Marcy and I will be keeping an eye on that as we go along, and we'll be answering the questions at the end. But certainly, type your question in the chat box. We'd like to hear from everybody that's out there. So today we have a very special guest speaker, one of our colleagues from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Schenectady County, Master Gardener Kathryn Harder, or Kathy, I think she goes by, so that's good. And she's a very active Master Gardener over there. We were talking a little bit earlier about the plant sale that's coming up Friday and Saturday with the Master Gardeners over in Schenectady. So there's still time to get in on that. And I'm very excited to have pollinators as one of our topics for our programs here because it is a great topic, and a lot of folks are interested in pollinators because it is so important and something we hear about in the news. So Kathy, thank you for being here today, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thank you for having me. And first I want to just welcome all you gardeners who are participating today. It's great to have you here. And it's great to have you see that you're interested in helping the native pollinator population. It's always exciting to see hummingbirds, butterflies, and bees in our gardens, but they're really in trouble and their populations are decreasing. During this presentation, I'll discuss the definition of pollination, who the pollinators are and why they are at risk, how we gardeners can help, and the importance of native plants and some of our favorite pollinator plants. I love to talk about native plants and pollinators, but I am not an expert. If I cannot answer your question in the chat box, I hope Marcy or David can help. Let's start with the definition of pollinators. And I realize some of you may know some of the information that's coming out today. So just bear with me. We'll go through some basics about pollination and the pollinators, and then move on to some of our projects. Because I'm also going to briefly describe some of the projects we have in Schenectady County. One is called Pollinator Gardens in Public Spaces, and the other one is called Adopt a Space. So pollination is the process of moving pollen from the anther to the stigma in either the same flower or another flower of the same species. This process produces fertile seeds, fruits, and the next generation of plants. Almost all flowering plants need to be pollinated. Some plants are pollinated by wind or water, and some are even self-pollinating. Most flowering plants depend on bees, butterflies, birds, bats, beetles, moths, and other insects and animals for pollination. It's estimated that 75% of the crop plants grown for food, fiber, beverages, spices, and medicines rely on pollinators for production. In addition to crop plants needing pollinators, 85% of flowering plants require an animal, mostly insects, to move pollen. Bees are considered a keystone species. We call the bumblebee and other pollinators keystone species because they are species upon which other species in the ecosystem depend. If they are removed, the ecosystem will change drastically or disappear altogether. Pollinators are vital to maintaining healthy ecosystems. They are essential for plant reproduction and produce genetic diversity in the plants that they pollinate. The more diverse the plants are, the better they can adapt to changes in the environment as they bring survival traits from a variety of plants. Best of all, pollinators such as hummingbirds, bees, butterflies are beautiful and fascinating. Because hummingbirds specialize in nectar feeding, they play an important part in pollination. These colorful migratory birds serve as a link between plant populations by visiting flowers and moving pollen over great distances. In this region, we have the ruby-throated hummingbird. The male is on the right and the female on the left. You can attract ruby-throated hummingbirds to your backyard by planting nectar-rich flowers such as bee balm, columbine, and cardinal flower. Here's an interesting fact. To sustain their supercharged metabolisms, hummingbirds must eat once every 10 to 15 minutes and visit between 1,000 and 2,000 flowers per day. By growing a bounty of native flowering plants in your garden, you can attract a variety of butterflies. The center picture, let me see if I can move this up so we could see a little better. The center picture shows an eastern tiger swallowtail, or Papilio glaucus, on echinacea. This large butterfly can be found from April to August. They feed on an assortment of flowers, but like large flowers, they like to land on large flowers like echinacea. A good pollinator garden contains food not just for adult butterflies, but for their caterpillars. Female butterflies select specific plants on which to lay their eggs, plants that will provide food for the caterpillars while growing into adult butterflies. Eastern tiger swallowtails lay their eggs on ash and chokecherry. Planting flowers in masses will attract more pollinators and create less work for them. The picture at the top is the head of our master gardeners in Schenectady County, Angie Tompkins, and she's there with her son, and they were on an outing when the monarchs were particularly interested in their faces. Monarchs are well-known butterflies, but as you know, their populations are decreasing. You may have witnessed this in your own gardens in the last few years. To attract monarchs, you need milkweed. This is the host plant the caterpillars feed on. You also need a variety of nectar plants for the adult monarchs. Include annuals such as Tithonia and Zinnia, which are wonderful nectar-rich plants and make great partners to plant with milkweed. Monarchs love to sip the nectar from the milkweeds also. It is best to plant a variety of flowers that bloom from early to late season. This provides food for the early season monarchs and for the late season monarchs before they migrate. Aster and goldenrod are both wonderful late blooming plants to pair with your milkweeds. Pictured here are the five species of native milkweed that we should plant in our home gardens. On the upper left is common milkweed, or Asclepias syriaca. This is the variety of milkweed you see most prominently along roadsides. Below that is butterfly weed, or Asclepias tuberosa, which has vibrant orange flowers and develops a long taproot and grows to a height of about 2 feet. The top right is swamp milkweed, or Asclepias incarnata, and this grows best in a wetter soil environment. Below that is poke milkweed, Asclepias exaltata. It grows to a height of around 5 feet and is not as aggressive as the other varieties of milkweed. In the center is world milkweed, Asclepias verticillata, a nice white addition to your garden, reaching a height of around 2 feet. It blooms into September, which is later than the other milkweed varieties, and provides a late source of nectar to the monarchs before migrating. This is the beautiful black swallowtail butterfly. The upper surface of the wings is is black with 2 rows of yellow spots, large and bright in males and smaller and lighter in females. The area between the rows of spots on the hind wings of females is powdery iridescent blue. The blue area in males is much less prominent. Black swallowtail caterpillars utilize a variety of herbs in the carrot family as host plants. They may include parsley, dill, fennel, and caraway. It's good to intersperse these herbs among your flowers for this caterpillar. Add nectar plants such as echinacea, Joe Pye weed, sunflowers, and monarda. They will also use common rue, which is a very attractive garden plant also. Moths are a beautiful and interesting wildlife group that are easy to attract to a garden. Gardening for moths is not that dissimilar to gardening for butterflies, and they share many of the basic needs such as food, water, and shelter. Common wisdom has it that moths visit night blooming plants with flowers that are typically white or pale in color, such as morning glory and common evening primrose. Moth adults rely on sugar sources for food, primarily flower nectar, but also tree sap, or in some cases, rotting fruit. Like butterflies, nectar-feeding moths usually have long tongues, allowing them to reach nectar located deep within the showy tubular flowers. Yucca moths, pictured on the upper right, have a mutualistic relationship with the yucca plant. The female yucca moth forms a pollen ball, which is then stuffed or combed into the stigma of various flowers she visits. Without this process, the yucca flower would not develop into the fruit or pod with seeds. The sphinx or hawk moth on the upper left may be familiar to many vegetable gardeners. Their caterpillars, called tobacco and tomato hornworms, are a well-known bane to vegetable gardeners. They're great flyers and have tongues, some have tongues longer than their bodies. Few folks realize that the seemingly nasty hornworm caterpillars that defoliate crop plants, garden vegetables, and wildflowers eventually morph into lovely nectar-feeding moths, which perform primary pollination to many of the same plants. A hoverfly is pictured on the upper left. Because they're so abundant, flies are important pollinators, even though they transport less pollen than bees. Hoverflies mimic bees and wasps in coloration and behavior to avoid predators. Hoverflies, as the name suggests, hover over flowers and feed on nectar and pollen. They feed on the same flowers preferred by bees, such as coneflower, sneezeweed, and sunflower. Soldier beetles, pictured upper right, and flower beetles can be found visiting flowers often. They feed on pollen and even chew on flowers, carrying the pollen to other flowers. These beetles are commonly seen on yarrow and sunflower. Wasps are predators of many insects, especially crop-eating insects. Parasitic wasps are beneficial because they can be released into agricultural systems, and they serve as natural biocontrol of insect pest populations. They lay their eggs on or inside their host, and as the wasp develops, it feeds on its host, killing it. The overwhelming majority of wasps and bees are solitary nesters, which means each individual female creates her own nest, or in some cases, no nest is involved. A wasp will lay an egg in a host and repeat that process. Social wasps are aggressive because they are defending their vulnerable siblings in an egg, larva, or pupal stage. Some are pollinators, like the fig wasp. There are 900 species of tiny wasps responsible for pollinating the world's 900 species of figs. Each species of wasp pollinates only one species of fig. This is also true of sunflowers. Wasps are their only pollinator. The term for this is oligolectic. This evolutionary symbiosis means that these crops owe their existence to one species of pollinator, and neither organism can exist without the other. Bees are by far the most effective pollinators because they feed only on flowers, especially native bees such as bumblebees, sweat bees, mason bees, and leaf cutters. There are 4,000 bee species native to North America, and they have co-evolved with the native plants that are here. They can tolerate weather fluctuations and work longer hours than honeybees. Bees can be organized into two groups based on their nesting lifestyle, solitary or social. About 3/4 of native bees in North America are solitary nest builders, meaning they nest alone and are not aggressive. I think this is important to know because bees can get a bad rap, and they are valuable pollinators to attract to your garden. Each solitary female bee builds her own nest and gathers her own resources and dies shortly thereafter. The bee on the left is a mason bee, Osmia lignaria. These robust metallic blue bees most commonly appear in early spring. Females carry pollen on the undersides of their hairy abdomens. Mason bees are responsible for pollinating many orchards and commercial crops and pick up the slack when honeybees fall short. Mason bees have a 95% pollination rate, meaning a successful transfer of pollen, whereas honeybees have a 5% pollination rate. With honeybees, which were introduced from Europe, falling prey to colony collapse disorder, many orchardists are turning to our native mason bees for pollination. There are about 140 species of mason bees across North America. The males do not have a stinger, and the females will only sting if trapped or squeezed. This makes them an ideal neighbor for the home garden. Mason bees are cavity nesters, and you can invite them and their pollination services to your garden by leaving plant stems and debris in your garden until spring cleanup, or by providing a bee house, such as the one pictured here. Bumblebees are social insects. There are 47 species of bumblebees in North America. Bumblebees are the B1 bombers of bees. Because of their chunky size, they can fly in cooler temperatures and are the first bees seen in the spring and the last seen in the fall. Studies have shown that for many crops, pollination by bumblebees produces bigger fruit, faster fruit set, and larger yields than other pollinators, including honeybees. They are among the few native bees to North America that are truly social, with a queen and workers. Like honeybees, they collect nectar and bring it back to the hive. An individual queen starts a colony in the spring after she wakes up from hibernation. She produces wax to make pot-like cells in which to lay her eggs and to store nectar and pollen for her brood. The young emerge in a few weeks as female worker bees. As fall arrives, most bees die, and only newly mated queens overwinter to establish new colonies. Pollinators need our help. Biologists fear several butterfly and bumblebee species have disappeared from parts of their range, including the once common rusty-patched bumblebee. Why are pollinators in trouble? It appears that habitat loss, introduced diseases, pollution, and pesticide poisoning amount for much of the population decline. Climate change is a suspected stress factor in bee decline also. We can do our part to support pollinators by creating pollinator-friendly gardens and protecting wildlife habitat. The expanding picture of our residential landscape does not offer many resources for pollinators. Exotic plants growing among the concrete and asphalt cannot provide the specific habitat that many pollinators need to thrive and reproduce. Many native bees nest in bare ground. A patch of bare soil or a dry bed of sparsely planted grass clumps are ideal. Native bees also nest in hollow stems from last year's native flowers. Other bees nest in abandoned beetle tunnels, in dead tree trunks, or brush piles. They need resources that a clean and tidy community doesn't usually provide. This picture was taken last year in Latham as a new residential community was being built. Imagine how many acres of natural habitat were destroyed. Through development, habitat fragmentation and loss, and our devotion to monoculture farming, impervious paving, and sterile lawns, we have taken much of the lower 48 states from nature, leaving little of the American landscape as undisturbed habitat. In his book, Bringing Nature Home, Dr. Doug Tallamy writes of the vital new role of the suburban garden. He says, the suburban gardens are not just ornamental anymore. They can and need to serve a purpose. It is within the power of individual gardeners like you and me to make a difference to the future of biodiversity and to our native plants and animals by supporting their ecosystem with our choice of the right plants for our gardens. Wildlife or pollinator corridors serve as stepping stones between two larger areas of viable habitat. They allow the animals to have smaller areas of land that they can use to forage or protect themselves while moving between larger areas. For pollinators, this is especially important in an urban setting. By providing small green spaces, they are able to help bridge gaps between disturbed environments that might prove hostile to pollinators. Cities have begun developing and expanding these corridors. The space does not need to be the size of a park. Even a small area provides immense benefits as a corridor. They can include rooftop gardens, windowsill plants, green spaces along fences, and curbside areas. It engages the community by getting the public involved in creating green spaces and also brings awareness to the environment. This picture is the bird and butterfly garden in Central Park under the care of Schenectady master gardeners. It provides everything pollinators need to flourish. It provides food by planting a variety of flowers that bloom throughout the season. It provides host plants for butterflies and moths where the adults can lay their eggs. It includes nectar plants, especially late bloomers like aster and goldenrod, to fortify the butterflies before they migrate. Water is available nearby, and this can also be a bird bath, a fountain, a dripping faucet, a small pond, or a mud puddle. It provides shelter. Pollinators need protection from severe weather and from predators, as well as sites for nesting. Leave dead snags as nesting sites for bees and other dead plants and leaf litter for shelter. Leave some areas of soil uncovered to provide ground nesting insects easy access to underground tunnels. Group plantings so that pollinators can move safely through the landscape protected from predators. And go native. Pollinators are best adapted to local native plants. Native plants often need less water and care than ornamentals or alien plants. What is a native plant and why should we use them? Let's first define a native plant. The commonly accepted definition is this: plants native to North America are generally thought of as those occurring prior to European settlement, which was about 200 years ago. This is because settlers from Europe brought many of their favorite seeds from their homeland to plant here. In the picture, we see Echinacea purpurea, or purple coneflower. It's thought by many to be a native plant, and while it is native to areas of North America, it is not a true native of New York State. However, it is a valuable and attractive pollinator plant here. Native plants co-evolved with native insects and wildlife and are deeply dependent on each other. It takes long evolutionary time spans for insects to adapt to the specific chemical mix that characterizes different plants. You'll notice that the alien Bradford pears, multiflora roses, autumn olives, barberry, Norway maples, or mile-a-minute weeds have little or no leaf damage from insects, while our native red maples, black cherries, and pin oaks will supply many insects with food. Some may think that less insect damage is a good thing, but when you see that insects have partaken of your garden plants, it means you are supplying the local insect population with much needed food and are contributing to a healthy ecosystem. Insects are a vital part of our food chain. Pictured is the invasive Phragmites that I'm sure you've seen along roadsides and crowding out our native cattails in moist areas. This species has little nutritional value and doesn't support the variety of native herbivores that our native variety does. If you're looking for good pollinator plants native to our region, check out these websites. The Pollinator Partnership offers 31 different planting guides tailored to specific ecoregions of the United States. Xerces Society is another great resource for plant lists. When you visit your local garden centers, ask them to provide native pollinator-friendly plants that are not treated with pesticides. And Audubon.com offers plants beneficial to our bird population. And there are several local native nurseries also that specialize in native plants not treated with any chemicals. Here are a few best practices to keep in mind. Often an alien species planted in a home garden will escape and become invasive because it has no natural predators. Seek out plants that are native to our region of the country. Some nurseries and garden stores still offer invasives for sale with a warning label. Please don't buy them. Avoid using pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers, and request untreated plants at your local nursery. And the secret to success is always the right plant in the right place. Many of our native bees need a place to overwinter, protected from cold and predators. They may choose a piece of peeling bark or stay tucked away in the hollow stem of a bee balm or ornamental grass. The monarch flies south, but most other pollinators stay put and take shelter somewhere dry and safe until spring. The mourning cloak, comet, and question mark butterflies overwinter as adults in rock fissures, under tree bark, or in leaf litter until spring arrives. Swallowtails, cabbage whites, and sulfurs overwinter in a chrysalis hanging from dead plant stems or tucked into soil or leaf litter. Ladybugs hibernate in a pile of leaves. Wait until spring, until after we have had a few consecutive days of 50-degree weather, to clean up your gardens. One of the ongoing projects for the Schenectady Master Gardeners is one called Pollinator Gardens in Public Spaces. As Master Gardener volunteers, we were very interested in native plants and educating people about the importance of native plants in their gardens. Creating more pollinator habits as demonstration gardens in public areas was the mission of this project. This is how we got started. A few years ago, after touring the greenhouses at SUNY Cobleskill, we asked the professor in charge what happens to the plants that the plant science class starts from seeds. That inquiry led to their donating the plants to us, so we looked for a community project using the plants. Since the pandemic started, we have not received plants from SUNY Cobleskill, and we are starting our own native perennials using our greenhouses and winter sowing methods. This process will probably take 2 years to get viable perennials ready for distribution. One of our master gardeners, Janet Chen, divides the protocol for the project, and we immediately found appropriate public spaces to plant the natives that were started from seed at SUNY Cobleskill. Public spaces can include schools, libraries, town halls, and public parks. Another Schenectady Master Gardener, Arden Luan, designed the sign, which can be purchased for the final gardens. One of our first projects was helping Pinewood School in Schenectady install a pollinator garden. For this project, we delivered plants, and the teacher who started the project took over the planting and the care of the garden. This is a group of our master gardeners at Maybe Farm, a historical site in Schenectady County. After a tour there, the Schenectady Master Gardeners were invited to revive a neglected herb garden. This photo was taken in May of 2019 when we removed the plants that were there and created a clean slate for planting the new plants. There was an abundance of milkweed, nodding onion, mint, and goldenrod, as you might expect. When we cleaned the site, we uncovered a lovely stone border and path. We incorporated a variety of herbs and flowers that were common during the time of the establishment of the farm, such as betony, borage, calendula, chamomile, dill, mountain mint, penstemon, sage, sweet woodruff, tansy, and wild quinine. The homemade trellis that we constructed from branches that were in the yard even survived the winter. This picture was taken during the summer of 2019. The plants were flourishing and had required very little care. There was no source of water close to that garden, so they were on their own with rainfall. The garden in the back is another perennial garden that needs care, just in case any of you are interested. This is the solar array project in Niskayuna. On a rainy day in September 2018, we planted pollinator plants at the Niskayuna Town Hall in front of the solar array. The soil was terrible. It was rocky and littered with shale. We used cardboard and mulch to eliminate the weeds. But honestly, the soil was so bad, there wasn't really much there to get rid of. We had to auger holes into the hardpan and plant through the cardboard. There was no water supply, so the plants had whatever rain fell on them. Some of the plants, as of last year, these are pictures from last summer, prove that native plants do not need pampering to survive. In the picture on the left, we have goldenrod, Joe Pye weed, echinacea, black-eyed Susan, big blue stem grass. Don't forget the grasses. They are also important to a variety of pollinators and create an interesting design contrast in the garden. We also have a lovely plant called wild quinine, which is really a very pretty flowering plant. And on the right, we have butterfly weed and penstemon or beard tongue. Last summer, the Schenectady Master Gardeners started a pollinator garden at Indian Meadows Park in Glenville. We marked the boundary of the garden and laid cardboard to smother the grass that was growing there. We then covered it with mulch and let it sit until we were ready to plant, which we did in the fall. The picture on the right shows the plants off to a good start this spring. Some of the plants in the garden include rattlesnake master, purple lovegrass, blue lobelia, little blue stem, world milkweed, and downy woodmint. Other public spaces where we have established pollinator gardens include Schenectady County Glendale Home and at the Sustainable Living Center in Central Park in Schenectady. A project involving students at Union College was delayed by the pandemic, and we hope it'll be revived this fall. Another program that we Schenectady Master Gardeners participate in is called Adopt a Space, a beautification program in Schenectady County, open to any person or organization that wants to adopt a public space. These spaces are most frequently in road medians along city streets. The program is free to participating residents who pick up the plants at the Central Park greenhouses and plant the flowers in their adopted space. Cornell Cooperative Extension partners with our local Soil and Water Conservation District to provide annual flowers. Our goal is to have these current garden spaces become more diversified and add native perennials, which will offer more food and cover to our native pollinators. Our goal would be for our Adopt a Space gardens to look similar to this pollinator garden at the John R. Parkwood and Plaza Island in Schenectady. Not only is this garden beautiful, but it is providing food and shelter for pollinators and other wildlife. These are some of the plants that we offer in conjunction with our Adopt a Space program. On the left is foxglove beard tongue, blooming in midsummer and reaching a size of 4 feet. It attracts long-tongued bees, including honeybees, bumblebees, miner bees, mason bees, and hummingbirds. In the middle is Ohio spiderwort. which reaches a size of 3 feet. It's not very fussy about its soil. It'll grow in loam, clay, gravel, or sand. It attracts long-tongued bees, especially bumblebees. This plant can be aggressive in a small setting because it is a profuse self-sower. So you might want to keep it intact and keep track of it as it moves about your garden space. On the right is the perennial favorite purple coneflower, reaches a size of 4 feet. It's a favorite nectar source for butterflies, bees, and myriad pollinators, including hummingbirds. The advantages for echinacea are that it is drought tolerant and deer resistant. The gray-headed coneflower on the left is one of my favorites. I love the way the flower looks with its drooping petals. It blooms in midsummer to early fall and reaches a size of 5 feet. It has many benefits attracting insects to the plant, such as butterflies and bees. It's drought tolerant and makes an excellent cut flower also. Joe Pyeweed in the middle is the giant of the garden, sometimes it can reach a height of 7 feet. It's a butterfly favorite, easy to grow, and its vanilla scented flowers attract many monarchs, swallowtails, and other butterflies. It's also deer resistant and makes a nice cut flower. On the right is mountain mint, which is also one of my favorites because of its bee attracting abilities. It blooms summer to early fall, reaching a height of 3 feet. It attracts many bees, wasps, flies, small butterflies, and beetles. The leaves are very fragrant with a strong minty aroma. They also have a long bloom time. This is another one you might want to keep track of in your garden, as it will travel beyond the boundaries of your perennial gardens. Don't forget the grasses and sedges. They provide host plants for some butterflies and important nesting areas for them. People are now using sedges to replace their turf lawns. They require no mowing and have many benefits to insects and pollinators, much more than a turf lawn provides. On the left is purple lovegrass, which grows to a height of 2 feet. It hosts caterpillars of zebulon, dusted, and Delaware skippers. It thrives in full sun and sandy sites, even roadsides that receive winter road salt. Those terrible strips between the sidewalk and the road. This grass will flourish there. It's a tough ornamental grass, and it is absolutely stunning addition to any rock garden or drier landscape. Blue grama grass reaches a height of only 12 inches. It provides shelter and nesting material and seeds to many songbirds. It's drought tolerant, clump forming native grass. It's also often seeded in as a native lawn alternative. Little blue stem blooms midsummer to early fall, reaches a height of 3 feet. It's a host plant to 9 skipper species of butterfly, provides seeds for birds. It's one of the most widely distributed species of grass in the United States. It's very drought tolerant, but it also does well in moist situations. The blue lupin, which we included last year in our Adopt a Space, is a very tricky one to grow from seed. It develops a long taproot and is very difficult to transplant. Last year, we tried to grow it for the Albany pine bush, and we were only moderately successful. It's a wonderful plant, though, essential to the life cycle of the frosted elfin butterfly and the Carner blue butterfly, which is a federally endangered species. Long-tongued bumblebees are common visitors, and some mason bees and honeybees also visit this plant. Here are some annuals and herbs that are nice to have in your garden also, along with your perennial flowers. Zinnia is a great annual that provides nectar for a long period of time, and there are so many beautiful colors available. Marigolds are in the center. Sunflowers on the right. All species attract a huge diversity of bees, wasps, flies, butterflies, and pollinating beetles. Herbs such as parsley and dill provide butterfly caterpillars with an important food source. And anise hyssop in the middle at the bottom, it is a perennial. It's an important addition to pollinator and butterfly gardens as it provides nectar for bees, hummingbirds, and butterflies well into the fall season. Birds may also eat the seeds left on the stalks. Don't forget the trees and shrubs. High bush blueberry is visited primarily by bees, especially mining bees, long-tongued bumblebees, and various mason bees. Plus, it provides wonderful fruit for the birds and a beautiful fall color. Clematis virginiana is a beautiful native vine visited by hummingbirds and bees, has a profusion of very fragrant flowers. Amelanchier, or also known as shadbush or serviceberry, is an excellent pollinator plant, attracting many bees. It blooms early, so it provides an early nectar source. White oak on the right supports hundreds of insects. Native oak trees support pollinators throughout the year in a number of ways, but especially by providing winter shelter and habitat. In fact, native oaks give more than 500 pollinator species a home and enable them to return for years to come. Doug Tallamy gives a famous lesson that is easy to understand. Most of us are very familiar with the friendly chickadee. A chickadee family of 4, a mother, father, and 2 young, have very specific eating requirements. Young chickadees need easily digestible protein. This comes from juicy and succulent caterpillars. Nuts and berries will not feed these babies and many other baby birds. Tallamy observed a chickadee family from dawn to dusk, revealing that the parents deliver on the young on average 1 caterpillar every 3 minutes. This adds up to between 350 and 570 caterpillars every day. Over 18 days until the young have fledged, this is an astounding 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars. That's a lot of insects for one family of birds. Where do these caterpillars come from? They come from native plant communities. Here's a list of resources that may be helpful to you. I would also like to recommend Margaret Roach, who has a podcast called A Way to Garden, and also writes articles for the New York Times twice a week. Doug Tallamy has a new website called homegrownnationalpark.org. He encourages home gardeners to plant native and add your yard to the map to support pollinated corridor sites throughout the U.S. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for participating today in Lunch in the Garden, and I hope you will join the effort to help our pollinators.